So I was feeling kind of nostalgic recently. Bored, waiting for the new games to come out to make a video on. So a friend and I just said, screw it. We haven't played Resident Evil 5 in years. Let's give it a go. It's Resident Evil 5, alright. An action game with a Resident Evil paint job. We just went through on my New Game Plus character. It was more of a sightseeing event, just to remember the game. I swear, every time I come back, Resident Evil 5 is always the first playthrough. I do not remember half the stuff in this game. We got through, and the big question was, does this game deserve the remake treatment 2, 3, and 4 got? I know a lot of people love or hate this game, but honestly, I think it's pretty fun. It's the only real co-op Resident Evil game that's out there. I don't really count Revelations 2 because both players are not made equal, and 6 is just a wild child that I will probably make a video on in the future. I think Resident Evil 5 could get a remake treatment, but there is a lot of fixing up to do. There's a lot that would need to be changed. It's an ugly duckling with some beauty underneath. First off, the story is fine. It's wacky, over the top Resident Evil stuff. A direct sequel to 4, even referencing Leon and events of that game. It's pretty analogous to RE4's story beats too. You have monster fights El Gigante, Salazar equivalent, and then Wesker or Sadler. There's a few more boss fights, but just for the sake of comparison, we have a good chunk of the game that's just RE4 again. The characters are fine. Resident Evil hasn't really been doing the whole deep dive into the protagonists that started with the remake spree. Resident Evil 5 just has Chris and Sheva, two action heroes that have a bit more depth than you'd expect. They could keep both Chris and Sheva relatively the same for the remake. Josh, Jill, Wesker, Excella, they're all fine. A tone down on how wacky and over the top it is would be nice, but I don't think that's the part that would be super necessary to change in the remake. It's just another bioweapon, and it's just another set of new enemies to have to deal with, and that's okay. The remake could expand on all this, add new layers of depth. They could really get into Wesker's psychology, deal with Chris's trauma, explore who Sheva is, play up the whole thing with Jill, make Excella a more relevant character. There's plenty of room on the table with what we got in Resident Evil 5, and it's not bad, it's just generic and not put together in a cohesive enough way to give a satisfying story and conclusion to Wesker's tale, in my opinion. I really think they could leave the game co-op too. Sure, it takes away from the horror, but I think the game as it is now is very good at being tense. There are a lot of bad guys running at you, and managing your resources and trying to survive together, sharing stuff, and making sure you're not stepping on each other's toes is good stuff. Tone down the ability to heal each other, and get rid of the in between mission shops, and I think it'd work well as a co op survival horror game. I really do. There's an insane lack of good co op games these days, and with Capcom's recent steady stream of bangers, I'd love it if they added an awesome co op Resident Evil game to that roster. Most of the rest of the stuff has areas where the changes need to come in. First off, on rail shooting sections, they're never really that good, and there were more than I remembered, but front loaded. It was a weird distribution. I just don't think these kinds of segments work in modern gaming. Maybe if one player was driving and another was shooting, but still, I could do without these. Or maybe just one, for old time's sake. They're just clunky, too much of that over the top action, and it breaks up the pace in an uncomfortable way. We can swap those away, and I'd be fine with it. Especially the El Gigante fight where you're stuck in the vehicle. That was just ugly. Even as a kid playing this game, I didn't like that part. I mean, just in general, too, there's a lot of turrets and stationary moments like fighting Irving. I just don't think that it's very engaging or very fun. The remake could wholly re envision most of the boss fights and make them so much better with the modern style they've been going for with the remakes. Then the bosses themselves are another problem. Not just the way you fight them, but it kind of just is a rehash of RE4. You've seen them before. I don't understand why we need an El Gigante fight in this game, or the bugs, or the chainsaw guys. I get they were obviously milking Resident Evil 4's success, but a remake would be an amazing opportunity to completely redesign the enemies and make them wholly unique. It's just a shame because I think this game has a really cool setting that we rarely see. And instead of new exciting bosses and enemies, we just got more RE4. Okay, and then we get to the Wesker stuff. I personally think that it's fine. It's actiony and silly, but fun. I just would like a bit more feedback than Wesker just dodging everything all the time and maybe a bit more to those combat encounters. I get he's supposed to be strong, but it's not really that fun just running around. Maybe Remake could see something like a Mr. X or Nemesis segment with Wesker chasing one player around while the other does something else. Again, I think the over the top nature could be toned down here, but I don't think it'd be a deal breaker as long as we don't get into Resident Evil 6 territory. More co op stuff would be very welcome. A remake would be an opportunity for segments where each player gets split up and has to play a more classic Resident Evil style of experience. The co op stuff in the game is already pretty good, with assisted jumps and whatnot, but this could be expanded upon and turned into something truly great for a co op experience. Multi layered Resident Evil puzzles? I think that'd be sick. The enemy AI could also up the ante and start using different tactics. Just a thought. Speaking of the enemy AI, let's just do away with the end sections of the game where they get guns and it turns into a cover shooter. A remake could probably make this part better. It might be more like an Uncharted style of experience, but let's just not do it and say we did. It's the part that feels the least Resident Evil to me. The rest is still more actiony and goofy, but the controls and style of game that Resident Evil is just did not jive with the later sections. Hugging the walls like Gears of War and clumsily aiming your laser sight is not my definition of a good time. Let's stick to Ravenous Infected and Weird Monsters. Thank you very much. I just think Resident Evil 5 should get some love. At the end of the day, it's a good brain off type of game with some fun Resident Evil charm. I really love taking on the hordes of bad guys, managing resources, and just having laughs because of all the silly stuff. It's still Resident Evil enough for me to want the remake. I want Resident Evil 5 again, and I want it co op. It's a shorter game too, so a remake would be their opportunity to add more, to create something great out of the very pliable base of a game they have now. The side stories were fun too. There's just a lot they could do. It might not be a purist's favorite, but I'm not a purist. I like to have fun, and a Resident Evil 5 remake could just be the fun I'm looking for. Well, what do y'all think? Would you be happy for a Resident Evil 5 remake? Or nah, you could pass on it? I'd prefer if Capcom worked on new games in the series, of course, but this is more of a what if. I'm curious to hear what y'all think. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified of future uploads. Plenty more content to come. Anyways, I'm out. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.